Hi to everyone watching. Today I'm going to be testing out 3 different models for drawing. The first one is the Acer R7, which is actually a laptop as well as a tablet. The second is the Asus B121, a Wacom based tablet, and the Microsoft Surface Pro 3, which is an Entrig based tablet. Like the Acer R7. So what we're going to be testing with is drawing this little mannequin over here. I'll be drawing on the Asus B121, I'll be outlining on the Acer R7, and I will be coloring on the Surface Pro 3. So here goes. Actually, before we get into the drawing, first, I'm going to bring up the specs of each machine. The system specs for the Asus B121, it's a Core i5 Intel. It's a 1.3 GHz, 4 GB RAM, and a 64-bit Windows 10. The Acer R7 specs. It is a Core i5, 1.7 GHz, 2.4 GB turbo, 8 GB RAM, and Windows 8.1 64-bit. Finally, the Surface Pro 3. Surface Pro 3 is a Core i3, 1.5 GHz CPU, 4 GB of RAM, and a 64-bit Windows 8.1. Both the Acer R7 and the Surface can use the exact same pen. They can switch between each other because they both use the same technology. And the Asus uses Wacom, so that will be needing this pen over here. Okay, starting up the drawing. I will be drawing in Photoshop using a standard international page. Okay, let's bring this closer. Okay, in my other hand I will be using the Microsoft keyboard for shortcuts. Make things a little bit quicker. Here goes. Okay, so it turns out that the Asus cannot handle the high-end, cannot handle the size of the page. It's a bit too large, so it takes too long to process. So drawing like this will take way too much time. Okay, let's try reducing the page size. So I'm gonna now use a page of let's go with the page size, but instead let's resize it to about 1300 pixels on the height. Let's try that. Okay, it's a little bit smoother but still laggy. I'll add a new layer. Let's see. You must make sure that the pen touches the tip first before the hand, otherwise you will get things like that. So pen touch first. Okay, this is way too laggy. This is not gonna work. That knocks the B121 out. Okay, instead we'll be drawing with GIMP because GIMP doesn't require that much PC resources, so it'll perform much better. Because this is an older generation tablet, it won't perform as well as the Acer and the Surface, but let's see how well it does with GIMP. So I'm gonna make a A5 page that will amount to 1754 by 2480, single window mode. Whoa, now we got a blinking cursor. Okay, let's try drawing like this. Let's choose a hard brush, make it small. Okay, this ink seems to have some palm rejection issues. It's confusing the pen with my hand and jumps between the two. Okay, it's about good. You can see this. It's a bit more immediate. In fact, it's very immediate. It's good. The response is much better. Okay, let's try it out. Okay, well the cursor is blinking like mad, so what I'm going to do is, in the preferences, I'm going to turn off, let's see where that is. I'm going to turn off the cursor. Undo that error. Apparently this thing is malfunctioning. I don't think I can rest my hand on the screen because it is misjudging. It's actually really annoying. It doesn't look like this tablet does well with Windows 10. It was actually made for either Windows 7. Actually, the Windows 7 logo is here in the corner, you can see. And Windows 8 might have been the better upgrade option rather than 10. And I've gone off the page. Let me just correct that. Okay, this thing's insanely buggy, but we got our bases down, as you can see. We'll now move on to the Acer R7. Save this. We'll call it Mannequin. And close. Okay, this file is in a GIMP format, so we will need to convert this over into a Photoshop file. Just put the keyboard's receiver in. Okay, let's export this file as, okay, we'll do it with PNG. Let's bring it in with Photoshop. Okay, here's our basis. So now we will add a new layer. Let's flood fill it with white and reduce the opacity so we don't see it as powerfully as it was before. Okay, add a new layer for drawing on and make our color black again. Okay, it's too thick. Better. Okay, as you can see, performance is much more stable because this is a newer laptop. and it's on a recommended operating system with all the up-to-date drivers. Maybe it's still a little bit too big. Okay. Okay, I'll notice here that the pressure is much harder than it would have been if I drew with a Wacom, because intrigue sensitivity is not as sensitive as Wacom is, so you will need to press a little bit harder. Unless of course you have a program that can adjust the pressure sensitivity, then you can just make it lighter with that. But otherwise, out of the box, you will need to press a little bit harder than you usually would with a Wacom. Make my rays a bit smaller. One thing you'll notice is that the R7 remains at a tilt. This thing never goes completely flat because of the hinge behind it. It never truly lays flat, so you will always be working on a bit of a tilt. As an artist, that is actually preferable, because laying on a flat surface, your perspective will be a little bit off, so it's advised to work on a tilt. So it actually works out for the best. And I'm not following my guide there at all. Move the leg a little bit inward. Okay, it's got a bit of a peanut foot, but that's how the reference model looks. Let's add some interesting lines to this image. Some wood lines. His head is skew. Okay, with Photoshop, seem to have a hard time getting to a tool. Okay, there we go. Move this over a little bit. Okay, now we color with the surface. Okay, the surface doesn't actually have USB ports, so I'm gonna have to go through the network for this one. Okay, you will notice that the surface has a much higher resolution, so everything is much smaller. And of course we lose that keyboard functionality because there is no USB port on it. So we're gonna have to go to the side tools over here. Okay, we go back to the brush and we add another layer. This is going to be our color. You could name it, you could leave it, depending on you. Okay, this is way too large. Let's reduce the size of the brush. You'll notice there's a bit of a lag with the mouse. It doesn't follow as smoothly as it did with the Acer, but the Acer has NVIDIA graphics in it, so that helps with the acceleration, and Photoshop can make use of the CUDA cores. But because the Surface uses Intel graphics, it's a little bit less of a performance, but good enough for most uses. Just finding the right color here. Okay, and I'm going to color it in. The responsiveness now works actually really well. Now I could flood fill it, but for the purposes of checking the responsiveness of the pen, I'm rather going to color it in by hand. It'll take a little bit longer, but at least you'll get to see how well it performs. See if we can get in a little closer. When it comes to making small lines, you won't notice the lag as much as when you're drawing fast. Then you will see the difference. Okay, let's add some shades. I'll add a new layer just in case I want to change the base color later on. Okay, let's name this shades. And our color needs to be a little bit darker, slightly tinted towards the blue. So I'll add a bit of a mustardish color in there. Okay, too light. Let's go a bit bolder. Let's take it back down a bit. Much better, more visible. Okay, his head is a little bit out of the socket, but at least it's still connected. Bear in mind this document is only 1000 pixels roughly, so the performance will be good. But if you're going above 2000, you might start experiencing some performance issues, some lag with the brush. So don't go too high when it comes to working with the surface models, unless you got NVIDIA graphics or a higher end graphics card. Okay, that's the base layer. Let's add some variation in color, maybe a lighter tone, more towards the yellows. This is just some specular light. Wood isn't exactly very shiny, but just to give it some interest. Okay, now even though there isn't a backlight here, I'm gonna add one. Let's give it a bluish tint. Backlight is basically a light coming from behind, so it will just catch the edge of the model. So I'll make a new layer for that. Call it backlight. And this will just go on the very edge of the model. Not exactly accurate, but interesting. Okay, and that's the drawing. You can colorize the top layer. Well, let's group these two. Okay. And there it is.